Recording that shows how to create a terms wiki. I'm starting at wiki.trustoverip.org in a browser, and I'm just going to browse down here to the concepts and terminology working group. You'll see that there's some documentation about terms wikis, and there's a list of them here. Now, you notice there is a thing about how to create a terms wiki. So I'm going to go there. Now, this says how to create it outside the Trust Over IP org, but I'm going to actually follow these instructions inside the Trust Over IP org as well. The reason that it says outside is because we figured people on the CTWG would create these for you, but maybe that's not always going to be the case. So anyway, do you have someone in the org that has the right to create GitHub repos for the GitHub account that you're looking at? Here's the Trust Over IP Foundation account, and I'm going to create a repo for the Trust Tech Stack Working Group. So let's see, is there already a Tech Stack Working Group repo? No, there's some sub repos there, but I'm just going to say new right here. And under template here, I'm going to say I want to use the terms repo template. And I'm going to call this repo TSWG. I'm going to say home of terminology for the Tech Stack Working Group. And we'll make it public and go ahead and create that repo. Okay, now that we have the repo, there's a few little items that we ought to clean up. First thing is I'm going to go edit the README. I'm going to say this is terms for the Tech Stack Working Group. And we'll say, okay, and now we'll say, what are the things we have to do here? Turn on the GitHub Wiki feature for this repo. Well, I can see that I already have the Wiki feature turned on by default. So great, that's done. Turn off most of the other features. You won't need them. Go to Settings, Options, Features, and unclick other stuff. So let's go do that next. I'm going to bring up this tab here. Settings, Options. So let's see, what other stuff do we need? Do we need issues? Probably not. We don't want to restrict editing to users in the teams with push access only. This would make it so that only pretty privileged people could contribute to the wiki. So let's uncheck that. We don't need a project view. We don't need this to be part of the GitHub archive program. Pull request settings don't matter. I think everything else here is fine for now, so there's no save button. All of these changes take effect as soon as you click the boxes, so we're good. All right, so back over to the checklist. So we've turned on the GitHub Wiki feature. We've turned off most of the others. Add at least one term to your wiki. So now we're going to go over to this wiki, and we're going to add a term. Create the first page. We're going to call this term my term. I'm not capitalizing it because whether you capitalize a term or not should depend on whether it's at the beginning of a sentence. If you actually do capitalize, what you're saying is this part always needs to be capitalized. In most terms, that's not true. So I'm just going to write a definition here. And I'm going to say a really cool term that everybody should use correctly. There, that's my definition of this term. I'm going to save the page. And now over here, my term shows up as a wiki page. Notice that the URL has a hyphen in it, even though the term did not have a hyphen in it. Okay, enough with that. Let's see, so we've added a term to our wiki. Okay. Choose an official tag that will identify your scope. And if you go follow these conventions here, I'll bring them up briefly. we basically say that working groups are things like TSWG. Oh, there we go. Okay. So this would be the tag that we want for our stuff. And because we've named our repo TSWG, everything in this repo will automatically be tagged TSWG in our final glossary. If the glossary pulls stuff from other places, like let's say we borrow some terms from somebody else, they will have a different tag on them. But all, like my term, will be tagged to belong to TSWG. So we've basically satisfied that requirement. Okay, now create a page called tags. This is if you want to tag everything in your repo with something else, like tagging it as pre-release or something. I'm going to skip this step. I don't believe it's important. I'll mark it as done. Most of the time, I think you're going to skip this step too, so I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about this. Tagging your repo is kind of a release and versioning mechanism, and you don't need to think about it a lot right now. By the way, when I say tagging here, I'm not talking about GitHub tags or Git tags. I'm talking about tags in glossaries. Okay, share the URL with people who need to collaborate with you. So this is the URL of the repo that I just created. Okay, so if I wanted, I would copy this and then I would go email it to people and say I created a Terms Wiki repo. Delete these instructions now that they're irrelevant. Okay, and this how to contribute doesn't point anywhere interesting, so I'm just going to delete all this stuff now that I've done it. Okay, and then I'm going to commit my changes, and now we have a nice clean repo. The next thing I'm going to do is go back over to my wiki, and then I'm going to follow the instructions that are hyperlinked right here. Configure your repo to publish a glossary. All of these steps are things we've already been through. Okay, so here, configure your repo to publish a glossary. Let's see what that does. This is a Google Doc, how to enable glossary generation for a terms wiki. Okay, sounds like about the right thing. So let's follow these instructions here. It says you're going to be working with a URL that looks something like this, and our URL does look like that. It doesn't have the little terms part on the end, and it says TSWG instead of CTWG, but otherwise same kind of a URL. Okay, and when we're done, we're going to be able to browse to something that looks like this. Instead of it saying CTWG terms, it's going to say TSWG. Okay. So, instructions. Acting as a developer with admin access to the repo in question, create a personal access token that has repo scope. Okay, this is something that I would do on my developer account on GitHub, not something that I would do on the Trust over IP account. So here I am on the Trust over IP account working on settings for the organization, but that's not what I want to do. I want to be a developer. I said settings, I came down to the very bottom, said developer settings, personal access tokens, and I created one. This is the token for generating glossaries for me. So whatever developer's doing this has to do this at least once. They create a token. Okay. How I do that in greater detail, I'm not going to worry about so much, but now it says copy the token to the clipboard after you create it. I have a little password manager, so I'm going to look up the token this way. GitHub personal access token and copy it. Okay, and then still acting as that developer, browse to the repo and go to settings, secrets, actions, new repository secret. Okay, so here's the repo. Okay, back in my TSWG repo. Let's go to settings. And then what was it said? It said go to secrets, actions, and new repository secrets. So secrets, actions, new repository secret. Okay, And I'm supposed to create a secret that is named access token and paste the value from the clipboard. So, come on. There's my value. Pasted. Now I have this secret. Okay. Next, clone the repo in the command line shell in your dev workstation, whatever. Okay, so I'm going to clone the repo. So that means I'm going to go over to here, and I'm going to copy the link here. And now I'm going to go over to, I'm going to bring up an IDE. Okay, and I'm going to say git. Okay, I've now cloned the repo. Okay, great. And I'm just going to, for my own clarity here, I'm going to copy a git ignore file that I was playing with. This is not a necessary step, but it will be nice for me, and I'll remove this old stuff I was experimenting with. Okay, so here's my little repo. Now what's the next step? Clone the repo. Set up your repo to use GitHub Pages to publish a glossary. In your local clone, run the following sequence of commands. I'm just going to copy this. Okay. So here's the sequence of commands. I just pasted it. There we go. I just did it. Okay, next thing to do. Then on the web version of your repo, browse to Settings, Pages, turn on Generation, and select the root of the GitHub Pages branch as the source. So I'm going to come over here, Settings, Pages. The source for GitHub Pages is going to be the GH Pages branch that I just created with that command that I ran in my thing. So now it's saying that the repo will be published here. The web pages for the repo will. Okay. In the root of the local clone, define a GitHub action. Change to the main branch. Okay, let's make sure we do that. See, I'm currently on the GH Pages branch. I'm going to change to git checkout main. Okay, now I'm on the main branch. Okay, and then what do I do next? Add a folder named .github, then under that add a subfolder named workflows, and under workflows add a new text file named glossary.yml. Okay, so GitHub workflows glossary.yml. Oh wait, I didn't want to make that a directory. Touch glossary.yml. Okay, so now I have a file and it should show up here if I GitHub workflows glossary. Okay, this is an empty file, and now it says copy this text into it and save it. So I'm going to just load this. Here's the text I'm supposed to copy in. This is an action that tells GitHub how to build glossaries. Okay, so I'm just going to go over I'm going to paste that right here. Save it. Okay. And now, let's see, what does it tell me to do? We also need to make a glossary definition. In the root of the local clone, create a new text file named glossary.json and copy the following text in it, updating the colored parts. Okay. So I'm going to go over here and I say in the root, which is right here, a new file, glossary.json. Fine. Okay, but this isn't the CTWG glossary, it's the TSWG glossary. And this is its source, is there. Fancier versions of glossaries, you can pull data out of more than one repo and various other things, but we're not going to go into that right now. Okay, there's some instructions in this document about how to deal with advanced glossary stuff. Save the file, add these things to a git change set, commit the changes, and push them, okay? So we're going to say, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, okay, we've got glossary.yml in the right place, and come back out here a level, and we say git status, what's changed? Yep, it's git add.git ignore. You don't have to do that step, it's just helping me ignore the project files of my IDE. Okay, so, and then git add.github, and this thing apparently is not saved. Git status, what do we have now? Glossary.json, there we go. Git add glossary.json. So now, git commit first version of glossary, git push. Okay, so now up in the cloud at github.com, we now have this information. Let's see what our instructions tell us to do next. As soon as this change is pushed, the remote GitHub repo will detect that you've added a GitHub action and will run it. Browse the repo and look at the Actions tab. Okay, let's do that. So here's my repo, and here's the Actions tab. And now, the action pages build and deployment has run, but that's not the action we're looking for. This is the action we're looking for, update glossary. This has never been run before. This is set up to run whenever a wiki page gets edited. So I could manually run this action, or I could edit a wiki page. Let's edit the wiki page and just observe what happens. A really, really cool term that everyone should use correctly. Okay, save the page. Now let's go over to the actions page and see what happens. You can see that this action is in process, and what's actually happening here. Okay, it's installing the code it needs to run the action, it's running the script, it's publishing this. It completed all the way through, and it updated the glossary because we edited that wiki page. Now if I go back to the actions thing, it's rerunning the GitHub pages build and deployment. So what's happened here is first we built a glossary, and now we're moving the glossary that we just built onto the website for this repo. And this takes, I don't know, another 10 or 15 seconds here. This pages build and deployment. Let's let it run, or we can go watch it run. Oh, build just finished. Okay. So now if we go back to actions, it's finishing up now. So what does the instructions say to do now? You may catch the action while it's running. Your GitHub repo knows how to turn the wiki into a glossary. tell the repo to publish its content as a website. This is redundant with what we said at step, where was it? Step 4. Set up your GitHub pages to publish a glossary. This little part right here, then browse to settings pages, turn on generation, is the same as settings pages. So I'm redundant, I don't need to do that. Refresh the web page, confirmation should change to a green message. So let's go look at our web page. If I go to this repo, I should be able to browse to its web page, and I can find out what page that is because if I come over here, it says your site is published here. So I'm going to take this URL, and there's no index.html page, but if I add the word glossary or glossary.html, either one, to that URL, I get my glossary with my term, my definition, and what version of the definition it is, what was the commit, when was it edited, and how many people contributed to it. And this term is tagged TSWG. So that's the whole process of creating a GitHub repo and for Terms Wiki and turning on glossary generation. At this point, I can take this URL and tell the world, here's my glossary, and I can take the other URL, which was back here, right here, and tell people they can go to that URL, find the wiki, and start editing terms. All they do is add a new page to add a new term, or edit an existing page to change the term, and it will automatically be published.